welcome back to the Real Collective Podcast. My name is Brendan McKeigan. With me, as always, is Sean Tasse. We're both from the Real Collective. That's why it's called the Real Collective Podcast. Sean, how are you, my friend?
Wonderful, pal. It is a beautiful first week of school. The kids are back at school this week. If you've got kids, I think I made that same joke last week. But yeah, it's getting back into the routine. The Bank of Canada just announced a recent rate change, and it sort of prompted this conversation today, right? Things are changing. Prices are up, prices are down, rates are up, rates are down. So what does this all mean to you?
And we're going to get into that. And before we do, if you're having a good time, like, subscribe, and share the channel on the YouTubes. And don't forget about Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so you can listen to this in the car and maybe tell some people about it. That would be great and helpful. If you have questions, our Calendly links are below. Calendly.com. Mine is /Brendan613. And I think Sean's is /Sean Tasse. Yep. So there we go. So there's the links, everybody. They're below. You can click on those and check them out. And we'll be happy to answer any questions about what you're about to see or stuff that you've seen in the past. So today, we are going to get into something that might be a little bit more attainable now that prices have changed. We're going to talk about pros and cons of renting versus buying. Now, we are realtors, and I know that a lot of you are like, well, obviously you're going to say that buying is the best thing. Well, it is, but not every time. Not every time. Maybe you are making a rash decision about something, and maybe renting might be best to get used to something. So we're going to get into that. So let's kick this off. Let's Sean. What was the prompt to say let's do this?
Yeah, I think the prompt for me was looking at the changes in rates. On a future podcast, I'm going to have a friend of mine, Drew Ross, to come in and explain the credits that are going to be due to first-time home buyers coming in soon. But you know, the rates have just gone up, and the prices have gone down drastically. So again, the question is, being raised. Is it better to rent or is it better to buy? And it really depends on your particular situation, right? So there's pros and cons to buying a house, and there's pros and cons to renting a house. If we just jump right into it, we talk about some of the different pros of buying a house. Obviously, the first one is that you build equity when you own a house, right? With every mortgage payment, a portion goes to equity, and there's a lot of mortgage products that are built so that every time you pay into your equity, you can borrow that money. So your house almost becomes like a giant piggy bank, if you will. So I think that's one of the first pros about buying a house. What about you?
You get a little bit more stability. It's not like your mortgage payment is just going to suddenly increase because somebody knocks on your door and says, hey, your mortgage payment's going up. You have your rate and you're going to know what that is. So it's not going to just get blindsided by it, which is good. And it's not like you can be forced to move out of your place.
Right. Yeah.
So unless you're doing illegal things and you get arrested, that's different.
Well,
I need a cook meth. It's my house.
Yeah. Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And then on that sort of similar note, you also have full control when you're buying your house. You get to decide how it looks. You want to paint the garage door purple, fill your boots. I saw one house with a garage door with a Batman symbol painted on it. Cool. Good for you. It's your house. You can do what you want. Right?
Yeah. I just picture the garage door of that opening and like a little Toyota Echo comes out.
Yeah.
I'm justice.
I'm justice. Yeah. Yeah.
And what you talked about too with building equity, it's kind of like forced savings. Like you're putting money away whether you kind of know it or not.
Yeah.
They're not taking any more land, said Lex Luthor's dad.
Yes. And all the comic book reference. Hello, true believers. Yeah. I love it. You should give yourself a plug for this weekend for Comic-Con.
This will probably be out after that. That's okay.
No, it'll be
Posted Comic-Con, everybody. let's go. Come on out. I'm gonna sit down with Dave Foley from Kids in the Hall and Carrie Ellis from Princess Bride, Robin Hood Men in Tights, Liar Liar. Um, he was in Reacher. I was about to call it something different. I don't know why, but he was in Reacher. Man, just phenomenal. Can't wait. Can't wait. And I've already met him once before, and he's just one of the nicest guys.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How's that for an ADD sidebar? The other thing is with when you're making those mortgage payments, I had a thought and it's out of my mind. I forget what it is. That's okay. I'll come back to it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What about some of the cons about buying a house?
Well, and I think this is kind of what touches into why some people are like, well, it's not that easy. You can't just go buy a house, is that it's the high upfront costs. You have to come up with a down payment, and then you have to come up with the money for closing costs, stuff like lawyers, movers, all that kind of stuff. And that costs money, and it's tough. And I think that's the biggest hindrance for renters to be able to get something, is to get that down payment saved up.
I want to do a big disclaimer here. So many people think incorrectly, especially if you've never bought a house before, that you need to put 20% down to buy a house. You don't have to put 20% down. When we get into the second half and we do a breakdown of renting versus buying, like a real case study based on real Ottawa numbers, you don't need 20% down. You can get away with just buying a house with 5% down. The average place that you'd be looking at in Ottawa, if it's a condo, is probably about $500,000. So, 25% of that is, 5% of that is about $25,000. So, you don't need $100,000 for a down payment. Obviously, closing costs, you'll have closing costs, but another con about buying a house, a thing that isn't great about it, is you're not mobile, right? If you get a job and in Dubai and you own a house here, you don't have the ability to just drop and go, right? The same as when you're renting. So you're sort of stuck and attached to that place for, a good period of time, right? It's always better to buy and hold than to buy and to move. And if the market goes down when it's time for you to sell and you have to sell, then you might have bought it for, in some instances, 600,000 or 700,000, and you're forced to sell it for, maybe $100,000 less, because the market is the market. The house will sell for what it's going to sell for. So that lack of mobility makes it a lot harder to just pick up everything and move.
Yeah, and to that too, because it's your house, you're still responsible for all of the maintenance. Mm-hmm. So, if you've got a good landlord and they're taking care of everything, then that's great. But maybe it could be something you look forward to. Is like, I want to be able to take care of my own washer and dryer. I want to make sure that those are working finally. Regardless, there's still a lot of maintenance costs to the home. Mowing the lawn, shoveling, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And if you're the kind of person that is just like, go, 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 I'm out, I'm social, and I don't have time for that kind of stuff, here you go. He's all for you.
Yeah. You know what? Mowing the lawn and shoveling the driveway, it's fun at first. Like, yeah, I'm a homeowner, I get to do all these things, and it gets old really fast. Like,
oh yeah, real fast.
Yeah. To your point, if you want to be the kind of person who just shuts the door and walks away, you could also buy a condo. And some rental places, you do have to cut the grass and you get and shovel the driveway. You get a bit of a discount on your rent, but in some cases that still does happen. I'd say the other con about buying a house is that it could be slow in terms of equity build, and it might even be negative for a short period of time, right? So if you're just planning on being in a place for 3 to 5 years, it might not be the best move to buy a house. But if your plan is to put down roots and be there for a long time, as I said, when we get into the breakdown, the pros of home ownership outweigh the pros of renting, especially over the long term. But we'll get down to that in the second part. And so I think we should also talk, and it's not like just, hey, it's a mirror image, pros and cons of buying a house versus renting a house. Maybe we should talk about the pros and cons of renting a house, right?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is kind of the opposite stuff. Like we talked about, you're fixed to the house, and obviously that means you've got a little bit more flexibility. It might be cheaper if you're doing all the maintenance costs, property taxes, or mortgage payments, or anything like that.
Yeah.
Depends on the type of apartment you have, but that's kind of the big thing, I guess. And then the pros, I think the biggest pro is just how much less maintenance there is for you as the tenant, or should be, I should say, on a regular basis. Like, the landlord is responsible to keep things a certain way and have things done a certain way, and they're supposed to do that. Obviously, not all landlords are fantastic. But generally speaking, I think there's a lot of great landlords out there. I've had a few. So less maintenance is the big one.
Yeah. Well, and like the other one for me is your cash flow is way better. I mean, when I did this breakdown with 5% down, renting versus buying, if you're buying a place and you're putting $25,000 down versus if you're renting, you're saving $1,000 a month for like an average type rental versus an average type purchase. So like that's significant.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of times people say, "Oh, well, I'm gonna rent because I save $1,000 a month." And when you look at it month by month, which a lot of people do, right? Most people are living, hey, month to month. How much money am I making? How much am I spending? When you look at it month to month, it makes sense, right? But you're missing out on the bigger picture, and I think that's the point that we're hoping to hammer home as we move forward.
Yeah, and while you do have that increased cash flow there, some of the cons reflect that. Like, you're not building any equity at all.
Right.
Over time, you're building equity in a house. When you're renting, you're doing it for someone else. I know that's the old cliche. And then obviously, like, your cost could rise at any time. There is less stability there. I know it's kind of the opposite thing, but you got to think about, like, once a year, your rent could just go up by whatever is legally allowable in that time.
Yeah. And like, you might also get a note from your landlord saying, "Hey, I'm selling," and so you've got to go.
Yeah.
And if you think you're going to be there for a long term, you might not have that choice. It's different in a building where it's like institutional. But if you're renting a house or you're renting from a one-off or something, I mean, we've sold a lot of rental properties, and often as part of the deal, the tenant gets a letter saying, "Hey, you've got to go. You've got 2 months. Figure it out." Right.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, you get a few extra bonuses, like, you get a 1 month's rent or something like that. So there's that. And then the other piece is, and it hasn't been an issue for us, but some landlords suck, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have like a leaky pipe or whatever, or a hole in the ceiling or cold draft or whatever. And they're just like, "Yeah, I'll get there when I get there." And they never get.
Yeah. Just like, my first place when I moved to Toronto was a basement apartment in a bungalow, and I couldn't even watch TV. And I don't mean like surround sound and speakers blaring. I mean just watching TV and having a conversation with my roommate without her stomping on the ceiling, the floor, and yelling at us to keep the noise down.
Wow.
And like stuff like that, you're not going to get if you own a home, unless you're living with your parents.
Yeah. I was gonna say it depends who's living in the house with you. Man. One of the first places I rented was also a basement apartment. I feel like that's a rite of passage. And it was in a building, and it was an older building, which they eventually tore down, and it's on the corner of Rideau and like Besserer and like right downtown. So they tore it down and they built one of those huge towers. But in the basement, it was like 3-bedroom basement apartment. There was like silverfish in it. It was grimy. It was like, maybe that's just because I wasn't clean when I was younger. I don't know. We did clean, but it's just like, that's what happens in a basement apartment, So it's there, and then the other piece, of course, and is when you look at your overall net worth, homeowners have a 40-time higher net worth than renters do on average. You take the average homeowner and the average renter and you look at their overall net worth, your house is a huge piggy bank. And so if you're thinking about, okay, well, month to month, how am I going to survive? It's hard. It's hard when you buy your first house for the first year or two to figure it out. Well, what am I not spending money on to be able to cover the costs? And it is a sacrifice that you have to make to get to a point where you can have sort of more flexibility in your life and overall a higher net worth, if that's something that's important to you. It might not be, right? And it's hard, like you said, right? It's hard to get into home ownership if you can't save up a down payment. It was really hard to try and save up. When we bought our house, it was about that. I think we needed to save up $25,000 between the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
It was tough, man.
Yeah, it's not easy.
No, it isn't. And you don't need 20%, right? You need 25 grand on a $500,000 house plus a couple closing costs.
Yeah.
Right? First time home buyers, there's a lot of new credits and incentives coming down the line. So that should help with some of that. And like I said, we'll have my friend Drew Ross on hopefully soon to talk about some of those new credits. So yeah.
That'll be helpful for sure. And that'll be a whole other podcast. So stick around. For now, we'll take a quick break and come back in the second half. You can check out a word from our sponsor, which is probably one of our listing videos, and it could very well be me. And Sean's got his notes there from the evening news, and we're going to go over that. So again, like, subscribe, and share. Download us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you want to talk to us, you can book an appointment in the Calendly link below, or just go to realcollective.ca and browse around. We'll be right back.
This episode of the Real Collective podcast is brought to you by Real Collective. Real Collective brings together best-in-class real estate agents and collective experts in the field to deliver the best possible service to our clients. We govern ourselves with honesty, open-mindedness, and compassion. With diverse skill sets, our agents are able to better serve a wide array of clients, including first-time buyers, first-time sellers, transferees, estate sales, investors, and rural, vacation, and luxury properties. Authenticity and transparency are pillars of our process, which allows us to put our clients at the center of everything we do. Our years of experience and knowledge allow us to deliver prestigious service and optimal results. If you are interested in buying or selling your home, contact us today at realcollective.ca.
Welcome back, Collective. Second half here, we're going to be going into Sean's specialty, the numbers. So it's time to play everyone's favorite game, the numbers game. A game that I'm not very good at, but let's talk to Sean about it because Sean has done a full breakdown.
Break it down. Break it. I was speaking in the car with Everett this morning, and I explained to him that a lot of my job is like math problems. He's like, "Oh, that's really cool." He's like, "Yeah, but a lot of your job is talking to people, and I don't like talking to people." So I'm like, "Okay, fair enough. I know what you're about." So yeah, what I did is I took a sort of a case study, and I broke down what it would cost if you were to buy an average price condo in Ottawa. So whether it's like a 3-bedroom townhouse or a 2-bedroom apartment, they're going now for about $500,000, give or take. Okay. Now, if you want to buy a nicer one, you buy a nicer one. You want to buy one that's less expensive. It won't look as nice. That's fine. But just for the sake of this case study, that seems like a reasonable price based on sales that have happened in the last 60 days. Okay. I also factored in an expectation of a price point for your condo fees being about $400 a month. Okay. And your property tax being about $333 per month, which is about $4,000 property tax. Property tax might be less, condo fees might be more. I didn't take into account heat, hydro, anything like that, because when you're renting, typically you're going to be paying that sort of stuff as well. So I didn't want to convolute anything in there. I did plug everything into our mortgage calculator using two different scenarios, one with 20% down, which is $100,000 of cash down, and another one with 5% down, which is $25,000. And I used an interest rate based on the new interest rate increases of 5.55, which I think is super conservative. Chances are it will be less than that when you do finally do it. I looked online to see what the best possible rate that you could get right now is, and you could probably get 4.25 or 4.29. A lot of the big banks are offering closer to 5. Obviously, you'll also have to qualify at a higher qualifying rate. So all of that taking all of that into account, with 20% down for that $500,000 condo, your payments would be about $31.83 per month. Okay, with 20% down. Now with 5% down, your payments would be about $37.63. So I'm going to send all this over to the people who do the production and put all of this in a chart. So hopefully that chart is now overlaying over top of our faces.
And if it's not, hopefully what we can do is put a link in the description where you can just download the PDF.
Yeah, exactly. We can do all of the things.
Follow along, unless you're driving.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll make sure that that's available, even if you're not watching, if you're just listening. Yeah, of course, with closing costs, don't forget you'll have to pay your land transfer tax. If you're a first-time home buyer, you might get a rebate for that. You'll have to pay your legal fees. You'll have to pay other closing costs as well, movers, yada, 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 right? Now,
did you mention that we're not taking into account market conditions, like the house appreciating over time? We're just talking about the price that it's purchased at over time, not if you buy for $500,000 and then it ends up being worth $800,000, like the market did a few years ago with homes and townhomes and whatever. We're just talking about the purchase price, what it is now, imagining it's worth the same amount in the future.
Yep. Yeah, and so we're not taking into account any sort of equity growth because it's not guaranteed, right? It might happen, it might not. On average in Ottawa over the last 60 years, the equity growth has been about 6%. What do you got, 7? Yeah,
I thought it was 7.
Yeah, six is. It might be. You know what? It might be 7 because the last 2 years might have really shot the numbers up.
That might jump the whole average up. Yeah.
Well, hey, you got 10%, 20%, 20% over a 3-year period. That really does something to it. So yeah, the average in Ottawa, we've historically been a pretty steady Eddie type of place. So rental averages by comparison, okay, you can rent for on average about $23.75 per month, whether you choose a 3-bedroom townhouse or whether you choose a condo apartment. Condo apartment's better because then you get to be sort of right downtown. A 3-bedroom townhouse might be better if you've got a bit of a bigger family. But you can see the difference there, is 800 if you're putting 20% down and closer to what is that, 1,200 if you're only putting 5% down. So it's a bit of a swing in terms of the average monthly cost. That's what we talked about in the first half. But I also went on to a really cool website, and this is the piece that talks about building your overall net worth. The website is called NerdWallet, and I just Googled NerdWallet rent versus buy calculator. And so you can go on there, you can punch in it's an American site, but you can put in all the data to get the numbers that I've got here. Okay, and what happens is it calculates how much you pay in rent over a long period of time. So for example, in 5 years, you pay rent $148,000 based on the average rental price in Ottawa. Okay. And in 10 years, you're paying $307,000. And then in 20 years, you're $668,000. So they're taking into account the small increases. And then in 30 years, in rent, you will pay over $1 million to rent a house in Ottawa, almost $1.1 million. Versus when you buy, if you're only putting 5% down, in the first 5 years, you'll pay $166,000. So it's more. You're paying more with only 5% down for 5 years than if you rent. But by the time you hit 8 years, you hit your break even. And by the time you get to 10 years, you've paid 283,000, 284 rounded up versus 307. So now you're starting to come ahead. And the reason you're not paying as much on the long term is because your property, the amount that you're paying for your mortgage will likely stay the same moving forward, right? And this is all based on a 30-year amortization, right, versus 30 years of renting. I'm assuming if you are watching this and you don't yet own a house and you're considering renting versus buying, you're probably in the range where you will either be renting or owning or paying somewhere for the next 30 years of your life. So it starts to compound as you put a higher percent down. Okay, so if you're putting 20% down in the first, your break even is actually 4.5 years. Okay, but you're going to say, yeah, but I had to come up with $100,000, right? A lot of people, what they're doing is they're going to the bank of mom and dad because mom and dad are living in a house that they've paid off, and it's worth a lot more money now than it was, when they bought it. Go.
It's just all those memes that you see about maybe if you didn't spend the money on your avocado toast and your lattes, you'd be able to save it. And you're like, you know what? Your house cost what you make in 1 year when you bought it, and that is not the case now.
Yeah,
you bought your house for $75,000, and now it's worth, 1.5 million.
Yeah,
and it's just like when the reality doesn't quite hit, and inflation has gone up so much. That's man.
To be fair, when they bought it for 75,000, the average salary was like 15,000 a year. So the ratios were still there, but they're way worse now than they were when the previous generation bought a house.
Oh no, absolutely. Like it was like theoretically, it was basically like, okay, take your annual salary and times it by 5, and if you spent money on nothing else but your mortgage, your house is paid off. And now it's like that's not the case at all.
No, not at all. So
that's why I'll be doing this podcast until 2094, everybody.
So that we can pay for our house. The spoiler alert. Hopefully this thing's overlaid. But by the time you get to 30 years, okay, if you're renting, it's just shy of $1.1 million that you've paid on rent. If you bought with 5% down, it's about $850,000 that you've paid into your mortgage. Right. And if you've bought with 20% down, it's about $750,000 that you've paid into your mortgage. Granted, you've also, paid, $100,000. So it works out to being about the same by the time you get to the end of it. Very close to the same by the time you get to the end of it. And of course, you're going to say, well, geez, Sean and Brendan, you're telling me I'm buying a $500,000 house and I'm going to pay $857,000 for it over the course of 30 years. These banks are crooks. And yes, they are. They make more money than any of us do. Okay. But what's worse is paying $1.1 million for the same situation and not having anything for it. Right. You're not building equity, and you're looking at your overall total net worth is 1/40th of somebody who owns a house. So rent versus buy, if you want to be in a location for a longer period of time, more than 10 plus years, you're better off to buy a house. But if not, then you should rent. And that's okay too.
Yep. And if you do have questions as a first-time home buyer, I've done a lot of work on home buyers, so I kind of know the ins and outs. Give me a call. Give me a call, and the Calendly link is what it's going to say. Hey, you can call me, whatever. Give me a call or book an appointment. Calendly links are below for Sean and I. Again, we're going to wrap things up, so don't forget to download us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and like, subscribe, and share the YouTube channel if you don't mind. We've got some good podcasts with some good content in there, plus got some fun videos. So take a look at those, and as we wrap things up here, if you want to rent, if you want to buy, there are options, and there are people you can talk to that are going to look out for your best interests. And hopefully that's us. So that would be great. Is there any closing statements that I missed on your end?
No, I think you got like all of the possible closing statements. It's great.
Nailed it. All right. Thank you very much, Collective. We will see you guys on the next one. My name is Brendan McKeigan. This is Sean Tasse. And until next time, keep it real.
Collective.